I'm going to be talking about a very interesting subject this morning, a subject that, let's say 98% of humanity has no interest in. So it's likely to be a video on YouTube that's going to go crazy all over the world. Like, what is she talking about? This is wild. Anyway, and then we'll be categorized in the nut zone. Well, it's true. I said, oh, one of those. But for us, those of us, this morning's talk is going to be significant to our life direction, significant to the evolution of our soul, significant to what our life can be in the future, not just in the next few years, but in the next several incarnations. So for me, this is very exciting, and to put together a talk like this is very inspirational and consciousness changing, and has me thinking in ways that are releasing from the old and opening the door to bring in more love and energy and compassion. And probably the most important is to helping me continue to recognize about the purpose of life. Okay, so the talk is called Agni Yoga and the Probationary Path. Is that going to be okay that I move this speaker a little bit? Okay, with the sound system. Okay, Agni Yoga. What is Agni Yoga? Agni Yoga is the yoga of advanced consciousness. It is the yoga of advanced consciousness. On our Facebook page, we host a Facebook page called Agni Yoga Living Ethics Community, and we've been engaged in a discussion about Agni Yoga, and a fairly knowledgeable person was adamant in saying that Agni Yoga is about fearlessness, nothing else. It's about fearlessness. And I thought, well, we all have different points of view. And that's part of the joy of Agni Yoga, is that you can approach it from wherever your need is and your understanding is. So I don't know that he would agree with what I'm saying this morning, but that's the joy of Agni Yoga. It's not written in such a black and white, cemented, crystallized kind of teaching that it limits and stunts our creative growth. It's just the opposite of that. It opens the door to creativity, and this is one of the reasons it is an advanced consciousness. Agni Yoga is a yoga of advanced consciousness. It is a yoga of those who concern themselves with their future. See, so people that hear the word yoga and they hear these definitions, they can't connect the dots, because the world knows yoga as hatha yoga. That's how the world knows, in this present cycle, that they think of yoga and they think of hatha yoga, and that's it. But Agni Yoga is much more than that. It is the yoga of those who have an inner impulse to strive toward the path of purification and perfection. Purification and perfection. Advanced consciousness. Path of purification and perfection. Those who concern ourselves with the future. So you see how our approach and understanding to this kind of yoga, it far surpasses hatha yoga. Hatha yoga is a physical yoga. Hatha yoga was initially launched long time ago to help bring the physical body into physical manifestation, anchoring the etheric body with the physical body so that we could grow physically and purify physically. But now yoga is completely different. Advanced yoga is very different, and this Agni yoga is advanced. Why the path of purification and perfection? It is to unite the fiery spheres of consciousness. This is why we say Agni yoga is advanced. It has yogas that have taken us up through from Hatha yoga to Jnana yoga up to Raja yoga. Now understand there is a yoga beyond Raja yoga, and it's Agni yoga, which goes into the fiery spheres of consciousness, the spheres of the higher worlds. And Agni yogis are carriers of this fire. If you have a strong inner desire to become an Agni yogi, you're going to need to undergo a probationary period. So hear that well. What we're hearing here is this is not for the masses. If you have a strong inner desire to become an Agni yogi, you will need to undergo a probationary period. The Master Morya said, "Let him not approach for whom the probation seems too long." And that's a quote from the book, The Call, verse 287. Let him not approach for whom the probation seems too long. So what does it mean to be on probation? Simply said, it means a long period of testing. There it is. It's a long period of testing. We are tested in the nature of our personality, the nature of our physical, emotional, and mental characteristics. These characteristics are going to be tested while we're on the probationary path. And we are also tested on four things: our creativity, our skills, our abilities, and our talents. Our creativity, our skills, our abilities, and our talents. Imagine our creativity is going to be tested. Imagine our emotional nature is going to be tested. Imagine our mental nature is going to be tested. It's like we can't get away from the testing. Every part of our beingness and consciousness is going to undergo testing during this probationary period. The Master M said, people do not realize the foundation of the teaching of the Blessed One. He says the foundation is discipline. And here's another quote. Spirituality and bodily, the monk of the community was striving to hold on to the path. In the first years, he endured a heavy probation. He was forbidden to kill himself with ascetic practices. But he was enjoined to conduct the battle under sole command of the Spirit. Now the Spirit, let me tell you what the Spirit is. The Spirit is fire, just plain and simple. So he was to undergo a battle by the command of the Spirit, and Spirit is fire. So as we're on the probationary path, where these tests are going to be given to us through the Spirit. The Spirit is fire, and it is fire that creates. Okay? Okay. Also, the Spirit is anchored in the heart. Thus, goes on the quote, thus austerely did Buddha instruct his disciples. Verily, they knew joy only in spiritual battle. That is why the thorns of the path are spoken of. Only when the will of the disciple had become leonine, Leo. We're going to be celebrating the full moon of Leo this week, right? I think it's pronounced Leonin, probably, Leonine, but it's written like Leonine. So we don't want to say Leonine. So Leonin or whatever. So I'm trying to make it a little light here, okay? So let me go back to the first of the sentence. Oh, I have to pronounce this word again. So only when the will of the disciple had become Leonin, and his silver bridle of the Spirit gleamed upon the feelings of the pupil, only then did the Lord lift the veil slightly and assign a task. And then gradually the pupil was initiated into the mysteries of knowledge. Many students of Agni Yoga yearn to become an Agni Yogi, but few are ready to accept the practice of spiritual discipline. The first level of spiritual discipline includes controlling our ego until it fades into the background and is eventually eliminated, being replaced by the virtues of our soul. So vanity is replaced with humility. You know, words on paper, this sounds so simple. But when the tests of the probationary path are given to us, we find it is not at all simple. The reason it's not simple is because of these three words, Maya, glamour, and illusion, are clothing our ego in such a manner that we just can't see it. We cannot see how the ego, is controlled by glamour, is controlled by illusion, and is controlled by Maya. It's very interesting. So when we go back to this and say that controlling one's ego takes place until it fades into the background and is eventually eliminated and replaced by the virtues of the soul, and vanity is replaced with humility, now you see why the probationary path is so long. The ego is gradually replaced by the qualities of the self, the capital S self. To take control over our ego and vanity requires renunciation of the ego. If you do not have the patience, stamina, and fortitude to withstand the tension of these tests, as MM says, the path of probation is not for you. It is better to drop out than to continue. Keep this in mind, because I'm going to read something from a book to help substantiate why this is. The path of probation is not for us if we do not have the patience and stamina and fortitude to withstand the tension of these tests. MM says we must test our physical, emotional, and mental nature so that hidden things will come to the surface. Now, this is what Torquem Sardarian says in the book 100 Names of God. This is page 54, and it's this particular name of God is called the dishonorer. Sort of in the middle of the writing here, it says, this is why Socrates said, know thyself. Exactly know what you are. Do not say that you are a great person. a holy person, a saint, this or that. Only criminals and insane people think they are great. They are at the top. But sane people see things exactly as they are. No one is condemning you. You are going to see it yourself and then feel dishonored in front of Him, in front of God. Sometimes you must stand in the light of your solar angel and say, look at me now. What do you see? Oh, what he says. Oh, what he sees. Let him not say what he sees. It is good to see it. Let us say that you are going to take your car on an important journey, but you do not know about the defects in your car. You are in great danger. The same is true on the spiritual path. Unless you check your car and find all the defects that you have and repair them, you cannot run on the freeway of spirituality. You see, Torquem wrote, I noticed this in my life. A moment came when I was going to do a very advanced meditation, contemplation. I said, I can do this. And then suddenly I saw what was happening to me. He said, I can explain to you how it happens. Let us say that the tires of your car are out of balance. When you drive around the city at 10 to 15 miles per hour, you do not feel it. Your car is perfect. Well, it's leaking a little, but it is all right. It is making little noises here and there, but that is all right because it is not giving you trouble. Okay, now go onto the freeway at 90 miles per hour. Wow, the tires are vibrating, the oil leaks more and more, and the temperature is going up. The noise that you thought was something little because then now becomes a big crack somewhere in the engine. Then suddenly your car either explodes or stops. But it did not happen when you were in this city. When you are not advanced spiritually, your defects do not come to the surface. When you advance, small bugs hidden here and there come to the surface and tell you, hey, what are you doing? You did not repair your car. And now you are driving 90 miles per hour. You feel dishonored. Do you see what I'm saying? Two of the more difficult disciplines at the beginning of the probationary path are how to eliminate ego and vanity and their associated threads from the mechanism of our personality. Yet when successful, and these threads are eliminated, we're going to find ourselves coming to the end of the probationary period. The threads of ego and vanity are this, according to the teaching: anger, hatred, jealousy, revenge, slander, malice, treason, and fighting. Isn't that interesting? Fighting. Fighting in Agni Yoga is also termed as what? Arguing? Fighting, so it's not a physical duking it out, knocking you down on the ground kind of fighting. You know, it's arguing. It wastes time to argue. Arguing is part of the threads of ego and vanity, all related to the lower section of the solar plexus center and the emotional body. Essentially, Ego keeps the focus on self-importance and selfish ends, leading the person further away from their destiny. If we take this to heart, really take it to heart, and I do 100%. I see it in myself, I see it in the group, I see it in co-workers, how it is our ego and vanity that prevents our unfolding human soul moving ahead. Moving ahead means to engage in greater responsibilities to enlighten humanity, to bring happiness, joy, and bliss into the world today, because we're so caught up in our own messes. We're so caught up in our own sense of, look how important we are, that we almost turn around and start bossing people around, acting as if we're some great person, when it's only our ego that's bossing people around, trying to make other people think, look at how smart I am, how great I am. It was so interesting to me. I'm learning a lot from my son. We're still reading 100 Names of God. And he told me this morning, he said, gosh, Mom, he said, I just love these words so much. And he goes into a description of his understanding of it. And he said this morning, I almost started teaching what I'm learning to other people before I've taught myself. To me, that's so profound. And why is that thinking profound? Because if we're not practicing it ourselves, how can we teach or be an example to other people? All we're doing is sharing rhetoric, and that rhetoric is typically misguided, distorted, and given out according to our clogged up filter system. So interesting. Vanity distorts the truth and promotes false images. Vanity distorts the truth and promotes false images. When Master M said the aspirant was forbidden to kill himself with ascetic practices, he meant just that. What was important was to create a stable foundation fused with the spirit of the aesthetic. Without a stable foundation, what's going to happen is later, when we are given more and more responsibilities, we're going to cave in. And I see this happen over and over and over again. This is why we're told, when you begin to meditate, only meditate for 5 minutes for the first year. The second year, 10 minutes. And then wait another few years, and by that time, maybe you'll be ready to truly meditate for 15 minutes. See, that 5-minute day-to-day increment is a period that we are getting rid of the leaks and the oil and the air in our tires, so we don't explode out on the highway of life. See? Without a stable foundation, later, when more and more responsibilities are given to us, we're going to cave in. What does cave in mean? Well, it's different for everybody. Sometimes people turn against the teaching. They turn against the teacher. They turn against their co-workers, and they go out into the neighborhood and speak against us, speak against the teacher, speak against co-workers. They speak against the teaching. Little by little by little, it's like a little worm. They start saying, you wouldn't believe what that group is, even though they're part of the group. Even though they have, 500 books of the teachings on their shelves. See, because they didn't heal those cracks in the beginning. It's very sad. So included in the first level of spiritual discipline is to integrate the physical, emotional, and mental bodies in such a manner that they are now fused with the harmonies of the soul and in alignment with the spirit in the heart. That's the first step. Create a stable foundation. The next step along the probationary path is related to our thoughts. For example, in the book Hierarchy, the Master M says, it is impossible to measure the fluctuation of thought. Therefore, we have established the probation of disciples by the refinement of thought. He wrote, every 3 years, we give the disciple the possibility of expressing himself in regard to the same event. Every 3 years. There's also a 7-year increment. 3 years and 7 years. The repetition. This is part of the testing of the probationary path. Every 3 years, Master Moria says, we give the disciple the possibility of expressing himself in regard to the same event. Only according to these dates can one see the fluctuation of selfhood. Now let me share something that's not in that quote. The 3-year process is only after you step onto the path of probation. So don't go back to year 1, which I did initially. Many years ago, when I read this, I went, God, every 3 years when I was a 3-year-old, oh yeah. So now, as wisdom with age has set in, now I get it. It's once we've made that commitment to the teaching, to the soul, to advance, and we're on this probationary path of testing. Now it's every 3 years. Now I get it. So only according to these dates can we see the fluctuation of our selfhood. Cooperation, patience, and devotion. These are things that will be tested in these similar events every 3 years. Similar experiments can be applied to other manifestations of energy. The more so since people have completely forgotten by now about probation. We read it, we read the chapter. One can also test oneself, directing our attention to old objects and observing the reaction of the influence of our remembrance. Old objects. Besides, we can ponder why a step crossed for the second time is always made much more difficult. Why is that? And Helena Rourke, in echoing Master M's words, says in Letters of Helena Rourke, she wrote, do not forget about the constant 3-year tests. It is much more difficult to go over again the same probation because the surroundings have changed, and it is difficult to make up for lost time and to find the lost rhythm which moves up and does not wait for the delaying ones. Is she okay? Are you right? Okay. Therefore, let us work with unremitting tension. Because I interrupted myself, let me go back so we can really understand this. She says it is much more difficult to go over again the same probation because the surroundings have changed. And it is difficult to make up for lost time and to find the lost rhythm, which moves up and does not wait for the delaying ones. Therefore, let us work with unremitting tension. Let us heighten our vibrations in order to receive the rays that are sent to us, which otherwise may pass us by. She also instructed her disciples about the path of probation in saying this, quote, "It is necessary for each one to give account to himself as to how and what way he passed the probations of the last 7 years." So now we have 3 years and 7 years. It is necessary for us to give account of ourselves as to how and in what way we passed the probations of the last 7 years. Let us recall all the probations which are given to those who came in contact with the teaching in the first days of the call of the great teachers. The first days of the call of the great teachers. Everyone had a chance to show his nature completely. And then she gives us an instruction. She says, read attentively the letter about probation and chelaship in the book, The Mahatma Letters to AP Senate, letters from 26 to 97. So if you have that book, and I'm sure you do, get it out and start reading letters 26 to 97. She says they are very edifying. She goes on to say, I have mentioned it already, but a useful exercise of memory is always good. The teacher follows a system of continuous probation. Otherwise, how can the deeply concealed accumulations be revealed? How can they be burned over the fire of devotion and striving? Many psychological ways are used by the teachers for probation and guidance of pupils. The ardent pupil who appreciates every hint of the teacher, who is severe to himself but benevolent to other workers, those are the ones who will successfully pass the probations, all the probations. But woe to him who confirms himself in his own importance. See, it's like I get letters from people, students who say, essentially they're saying, tell me how great I am. And I say, go outside and look at the stars and answer the question yourself. But woe, I'm repeating this, but woe to him who confirms himself in his own importance and considers himself a pillar of the teaching. She says, frightful will be his downfall. The path of probation is an indication or a symbol that we are preparing for an entrance into our spiritual heritage, our future. 99% of humanity is living the life of suffering, hating, and exploiting. Pain, we see this. Exploiting each other for physical, emotional, and mental concerns. Manipulating. Those who enter the path of probation then, those of us who have entered, can I say this, have entered the path of probation, we are challenged to surpass the life of the revolving merry-go-round and making a breakthrough into higher levels of consciousness. This is why our life is different from the ordinary person. In our experiences upon the path of probation, we recognize that as our consciousness expands, so does our field of responsibility. As our experiences on the path of probation occur, we recognize in the process of our consciousness expanding, so does our field of responsibility. So if your responsibilities are not on the increase, what does that mean? It means a lack of expansion. If you're doing the same thing this year that you did 3 years ago, or 5 or 10 years ago, or even less than what you did 3, 5, or 10 years ago, your consciousness is shrinking. It's not expanding. Your tests will come lesser and lesser and lesser. Fewer and fewer and fewer spiritual tests will be given. It is why, if we cannot handle the pressure, we're going to crack. See, just like the transmission or the engine in the car, it's going to crack. Our heart is going to crack. Our stomach is going to crack. If you've, had these experiences, we read about Kundalini energy. That's fire. What happens is Kundalini energy begins to activate the centers along the spine. And what really is occurring is that it's like as above, so low, as above, so below. So the fire comes from the chalice into the centers of the brain, which correspond to the glands and organs of our physical, emotional, mental body. At the same time, the base of the spine, one of the key centers, is activated by the Kundalini. And the Kundalini starts going up, and the fire starts coming down, and they meet in various centers, which affect the glands and the organs. If you're not prepared, if you have not shored up those leaks, you lose it. You become a crazy person. You alienate people from you because your ego is getting bigger and bigger. Your vanity is getting huger and huger. There's no spirituality anymore. I know this is kind of heavy to handle, but it's the way it is. If we cannot handle the pressure, we are going to crack and cave in. It is the chalice where we find the repository of our spiritual consciousness, not in aesthetic practices, not anymore. It is the chalice where we find the repository of our spiritual consciousness. It is through the chalice that we will come in contact with higher forces, such as the creativity of the self. When you contact the creativity of the self, the genius who is sleeping within our nature, that genius awakens when we contact the creativity of the self. Now when we look out at the sky, we'll recognize there's Sirius. Oh, Sirius, it has 2 stars, stars A and B. Sirius is really a sun. Wow, Sirius is an integral part of the teaching. We don't just go out there and say, okay, Sirius, here's the belt of Orion, and we have these 3, and then you go out here, and there's Sirius. We think, see, educationally, but why? Because we know in our heart. We know in our heart, for example, that Orion is an integral part of space and the teaching because of this central magnet, the cosmic magnet. So Orion and Sirius take on a whole different meaning and significance, not through theoretical knowledge, but through experience, because there is a relationship going on with our chalice and the chalice of the cosmic magnet, and Orion and Sirius, the greater zodiac. It's so beautiful. When you contact the self, you release a tremendous amount of energy and electricity into your system. If your physical, emotional, or mental bodies have small cracks in them, they will not be able to hold the energy, and the energy will escape. When the energy escapes, you will be out of control. This is why the teacher says, wait, step back, control your horses. Take the reins over your physical, emotional, mental body. Wait. Marijuana and drugs, alcohol, excessive sex, all creates big cracks in the minds of those who are doing meditation. Well, back in the day, we weren't concerned with marijuana. But today, we really need to be concerned because more and more states are legalizing marijuana. Arizona is considering legalizing marijuana again. So if it's legal, it's okay. It's not okay if you are a disciple. It is not okay. A disciple, if you want to become an Agni yogi, if you're going to meditate, you cannot do pot, weed, all those cannabis, whatever those names are. They get more and more unpronounceable for me anyway. Because marijuana and drugs and alcohol and excessive sex all creates big cracks in the minds of those who are doing meditation. They also damage the brain of the person, although it may take time. So people will say, yeah, well, my kid's been on pot for a few years and he's still getting straight A's. Talk to me 20 years from now. It's no different than becoming an alcoholic. Some people can drink for years and years and years, and then one day they have a teaspoon of alcohol and they're an alcoholic. It's not how much they're drinking. They can drink a teaspoon of alcohol, but now they're an alcoholic. It builds up. This is what pot does. I've done a lot of studying about marijuana and the effect of the brain. It's horrifying. So marijuana is a method where the dark forces can come in and affect disciples if we are acting stupid. So the problems do not always show up right away, but later, as the one starts to advance, think of the car in town versus being on the highway, but later, as one starts to advance and progress on the spiritual path, they appear as wounds and sores, which have been festering unnoticed for years. These cracks or sores eat away at the fabric of the person. It is like, I've got 1,500 stories I could share of what I've observed with students who became cracked. They are no longer stable. Their foundation has dissolved. I was thinking of one person that pridefully talked about they only needed 4 hours of sleep at night. This person is now cracked. Why? It's during the sleep life that we make contact with the ashram. We're supposed to sleep from 10 at night until at least 5 or 6 in the morning and then get up. 7 to 8 hours of sleep. 10 at night. Don't go to bed at midnight. You'll be lost. Say, I'm a night person. That means what? You also don't get up until noon. The ashram does not meet at noon. So if you want to be on this path of probation, 4 hours of sleep at night is going to crack you. These cracks eat away at our fabric. We must have healthy food, emotions, and thoughts. We must maintain pure relationships with others. So we can start today. This is not to have a guilt complex. I'm lost. No, you're not lost. But you're going to have to change your habits, and it takes a while to change those habits. So change the habit. Turn off the TV, 10 o'clock, go to bed. Turn on the alarm, get up at 5 or 6. I can't get up at 5 anymore. I just can't do it. But I can get up at 6. I have to. The dogs are my alarm clock. You want to hear a neat story? This is short. I had the 3 dogs out greeting the morning this morning, and all of a sudden all 3 of them were barking. Well, one barks out loud, 2 of them bark because they have, a soft voice because they had that taken out. Anyway, so they're going crazy. And I'm looking at down the street come a couple walking 5 little dogs, cutest little dogs. I've never seen them before. And as they came closer, I noticed there was one really big animal. It was one of those big pigs, a javelina, and it had a harness on it. And it was all shaved and looked clean and everything. And it was walking along with the pack. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, cracks. Okay. So life prepares us. Life prepares the Agni Yogi for service to humanity on a sliding scale of heavier and heavier responsibilities. This will be our destiny. Now, here's a quote from the book Talks on Agni, Volume 1, which is so beautiful in stating some of the tests on the probationary path. It says this: you are tested in your ability to write. You are tested to speak, speaking for a great cause. It's like speaking on behalf of the teaching. It will be determined if you can face greater difficulties with fearlessness, courage, and daring. Your ability to use your time wisely and to work goal-fittingly will be tested. Your capacity to forgive and not fall into the rage of anger and revenge will be tried to the limit. When greater responsibilities are given to you, your attitude will be carefully monitored. Do you say, I have too much to do right now? Find someone else. Or do you respond with a spirit of achievement and say, bless this project and those who deemed me worthy of it? I shall try my best in a spirit of joy. Another quote: are you able to make the necessary adjustments in your life so that the group effort takes precedence over personal concerns? You see why the probationary path is so long. In closing, from Letters of Helena Rourke, she says, yes, it is most dangerous to scatter one's forces on the first steps. Do not forget about the years of probation and of the adjustment of the organism. All the various disciples who enter the path of service must go through this process. Even the very high spirits are not exceptions to this. Of course, all the aforesaid is not applicable to the theoretical occultists. But, as I understand you wish to be accepted in the group of real disciples. And as you say, your sole desire is to meet the teacher and to work under his guidance. I certainly have not yet met, this is continuing on with the quote, I certainly have not yet met anybody who, after becoming acquainted, even if only superficially, with the teaching, would not like to give up the earthly burdens and join the teaching in his community. It is mostly those who have only superficially learned something of the teaching who are the ones to demand entry into the community of the Great Brotherhood. But they have not the slightest idea whether their physical bodies could stand the extremely tense atmosphere which surrounds this stronghold. One must remember that the transmutation of the organism and the nerve centers must take place here on earth. Amidst the spiritual struggles, amidst all the burdens and difficulties of life, amidst all the testing trials of every day, only this struggle evokes the necessary energies for the transfiguration and the outliving of all the gross habits and attachments. The earthly life is indeed a purgatory, and without going through it is impossible to enter paradise. And then she adds this, or to come to the brotherhood. So that we have to go through the earthly life to come to the brotherhood. The fires of the higher energies would burn the overloaded aura. The community of the brotherhood is too far removed from the ordinary earthly environment, and therefore it could not provide the necessary test conditions. So this is a very advanced talk. And like I said, 99% of humanity just would not understand it, but we do. We do. And now perhaps it will help us reorient and adjust our understanding to the purpose of our life, spiritually speaking.